Hey team, happy Wednesday to you. I wanted to touch base with all of you on that book and workbook that I'd given you as part of your Christmas present this year. The author Glenn Bill had done a little seminar, and I'd been very impressed. I've seen him a couple of times, and after he did a seminar that was based specifically on his book and workbook, I thought, well, what a great tool for all of us to utilize to sort of re-examine ourselves as individuals and use that for our own individual growth. So he did a seminar. It's been a couple months ago now, and I went ahead and ordered those for all of you. And I know we won't have time really to read through it and do any of the activities between now and our team kickoff, which will be on Wednesday the 6th. We'll have breakfast. We'll have lunch provided by Jack Overy, and then we'll have our keynote speaker after lunch. So we're going to make it a little bit shorter than we have in the prior years, but still we'll have a pretty full day, probably from like 9 to 2 o'clock or 9 to 2:30. And so mark it on your calendars, Wednesday the 6th of January. But like I said, we probably won't have a chance to really examine the lessons in the book and have a little sort of recap. But maybe in January or February, when we have another team meeting, we can go through that and sort of talk about our observations and the things that we've learned from those tools. Another book that Glenn had suggested that everybody read, in addition to his, is a book called The Little Red Book of Selling. So we'll maybe have to check that out and maybe have that for a future tool and book discussion too. But with regard to his book, The ABCs of Attitude, Glenn says there really is no secret out there as to attitude and how it can make you successful. He suggests that everybody should rank themselves on an attitude scale and see where do they rank from 1 to 10. And also he asked us all to define, how do we define attitude? And his definition is that attitude is the way you dedicate yourself to the way you think. And I thought that was pretty powerful, that we oftentimes don't really think of it in those terms. But he suggested that we can be positive in the face of getting the feedback and criticisms that we get by simply looking for the nuggets of truth in any of that feedback and criticism. Because he said, you know, for those that don't get any criticism or feedback at all are probably the agents that are really not doing any business at all either. The more volume that you do, the more likely that you will get feedback and criticism that just sort of helps you with all the different personality types and trying to make sure that we do the best job that we can for everybody, but just with the understanding that you can never satisfy everybody 100% of the time. And sometimes when deals fall apart, he suggested that may not simply be bad news, it could actually be good news. Sometimes there is a silver lining when things don't work out. And I think if we become better at identifying those red flags early on, we may decide when we're doing our initial listing presentations, when we're having buyers come in to do buyer consultations, we may start to get better at sort of examining, is this really somebody that we can successfully work with? Alexis Boland from one of the seminars that I went to this year said that she has really 3 criteria when she is trying to determine whether it's worthwhile to work with someone. And we shared those in a prior meeting, and we'll talk about them again in our kickoff meeting. But basically, you know, will they appreciate her and the work that she has done for them? Will she be able to actually help them? And those are 2 of the bigger ones. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it just sort of fell in with what Glenn was talking about. And, you know, he asked us to sort of fill in a blank on the sentence, I want my attitude to be. And I wrote on mine stellar. I want to have an attitude of energy and enthusiasm that is good for both the team and our clients. But you, as individuals, may have a different adjective that you want to use to fill in the blank. So just think on that. In the Good Attitude Playbook, it's sort of like a journal. He suggested that we keep a journal and mark down how many times did we say thank you to someone in a day's time. And look back on that and keep track and try to determine, am I living with an attitude of gratitude? Am I taking the opportunities to thank everybody for what they have meant to me and what they do for me on a daily basis? And if not, let's make a focus on making sure that we do express that gratitude. He suggested that you make a list of 25 people that deserve a thank you note from you and make it a goal to get that done in that week. The 3 biggest mistakes that he suggested that many people make is, number 1, they have an attitude addiction, where they're addicted to the wrong attitudes. And then everybody that has that issue needs to examine, are they actually willing to change their attitude? Number 2, as far as the biggest mistakes, was having bad beliefs. Because if you have bad beliefs about yourself, about others, they will definitely affect your attitude. And having the can't conundrum, where you feel that you can't do something, you'll focus on that. So having a positive attitude instead of a I can't attitude, have an I can attitude. Negative people are constantly comparing themselves to others. And sometimes when we're in a competitive environment like this, where maybe one team compares themselves to another, or one agent compares themselves to another, we lose focus on where we really should be directing our attention and energy. So he suggested that stop competing against other people. Only compete with yourself. And I can tell you that when I started in the business, it was sort of natural for all of us new people to start looking at each other to compare notes. And you start to get an impression of, hey, they're doing better than I am. Why am I not doing as well? You can't waste your time and energy on something like that. Just focus on the principles and doing the right things and building the business, and things will happen in their own time and in their own way for you in particular. And then finally, he suggested 3 ways that we could all become more positive in our attitudes. Number 1, just have an awareness. Do you know how you are approaching every day and how you wake up with a particular attitude, what your attitude is during the day, and what is your attitude when you go to sleep at night? Number 2, be nice. There really is no reason to not be nice. One of the phrases, though, is that you always want to be nice until it's time to not be nice. So, yeah, keep in mind that we're here to stand up for our clients and so forth, but we can always do it in a nice way, even if we're faced with somewhat rudeness or what have you from the other side. Try to always focus on being nice. At least you know that you took the higher road. And then number 3, controlling your emotions. Every one of you is so good at that, especially when I've seen you faced with very difficult challenges from a client or a transaction or so forth. And I've been very impressed with how you've been able to control your emotions. And I think all of you should pat yourselves on the back for having that kind of ability, because it's not easy sometimes. So anyway, that's really just sort of a summary of the things that he talked about that I took notes on, and I think you'll find more in-depth information about all of those things in the book and the workbook. I hope you enjoy it. I know that we're probably gearing down on finishing out the year with our last closings, and everybody's got family things and so forth. So I just want to thank you. I know the year's not quite over yet, but I just want to thank you for a really great year, for all of your hard work, and for everything that you guys have meant to me. Because you're really awesome, and I really appreciate you, and I thank you for being part of this team. Okay, take care. Have a great day.